One is incentives for going into computer science or learning about how to teach computer science for current teachers and people who are wanting to become, well, they're teachers currently and they're wanting to move into this field. Is that such a thing, or is that a possibility? Do they get more pay, more compensation if they go into that area of teaching?
I can talk a little bit about what we're going to do on the Marshall Plan side. We do want, there's a couple buckets that I'll touch on, particularly for the teachers and getting them re-educated. Where we do have a chunk of dollars to help support teachers who want to get re-educated into the computer science field. With those costs, to help schools deal with leave time as well, because that's a big barrier that we have as a teacher that wants to get into these other fields, but they have training that's sometimes during the school hours. We'll need a substitute to come in. How do we get that addressed? So we are trying to contribute some resources to that for the first time. I think that's one of the first times anyway we've been doing that in critical shortage fields, at least first time in a while. As to what they get out of it themselves, I would have to defer to my other colleagues on the panel or at MDE if there's greater salary attached, et cetera. I don't know that. But we're trying to do some resources to help those teachers get that opportunity to expand the training.
So most salary schedules don't provide additional pay for people in need areas, and it's a topic it gets talked about a lot. So they're mostly going into it because they want to do it, which is, they mostly didn't go into teaching for the salary in the first place, since it's not a very highly paid occupation. They go because it's satisfying to help kids learn, and this is an important area for kids, and they want to make good for the kids.
I would think that would show up strongly on your resume, though, if you had such a certification. So it's an excellent idea. There we go.
Hello, my name is Naki Koch. I'm from SAMCOG, Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. I have a question for Jeremy about competency-based education. You talked a little bit about it, and you have to master a subject before you can move on to the next one. My questions are like threefold. How do you measure whether someone's moved forward? Are there good examples of this from elsewhere? And how do you institute a system of competency-based learning?
I'm up there so I can actually see.
Absolutely. I'm going to have you.
All right, yeah. So you're kind of behind the pillar there, so they can actually see me when I answer. Great question. The short story is I don't know. No, it's there are. What I will tell you is we've got schools trying to figure that out. Armada is a great example of a school district that spent time on it. Our dollars that we're supporting are for the school districts experimenting in this field to figure out what are the best measurement tools. They've got some ways to do it, and they're playing around with how that makes the most sense and what's the most effective way to measure that progress. I can get you a list later, but there's probably 13 to 15 different schools that I know of that are working on that right now, and that's why our dollars are just to support those, and it's a small investment, so they can kind of map out the way and be the pioneers for everybody else.
But are there some best practices? Has it, in terms of offering it or recognizing it, is it working somewhere?
We've got some initial data on that. And we think it's working very well. Armada's provided some really great data and information of how they've implemented it and how they've seen student performance increase. But it is still very much, I would say, early on in the adoption curve for this. And so we're kind of continuing to support their efforts as that proof of concept. And then we feel that it's going to succeed in that. And that's why you only see small investment to continue to support that before we really push that out everywhere. But we want to get the conversation going now, which is why we always bring it up. Mm-hmm.
So first I want to say thank you to all of you. You did an excellent job. And so I'm going to pack a lot into one question. So I apologize in advance. So when you think about the ALICE data and you think about 40% of Michiganders kind of meet that definition, there's a lot of work that needs to happen, both on the kind of front end when we think about kind of getting children early, but also as we think about career advancements. And so I'm just wondering, and that actually requires that systems are working together. So economic, workforce, and community development systems. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of share where perhaps you see the intersection between those three and where you think Michigan is really doing a good job, where perhaps there are gaps. So if you had your magic wand, like to wave, that you would solve it by doing X. And then what states do you think are really kind of leading in this space?
So can I jump in first?
Yeah.
Great. So can everybody hear me? Is that good? Okay. So one thing about the Alice household, when I said, first of all, we've got 40%. And the goal is to decrease that 40%, which is, I'm glad I got this question because I didn't tie this in. Why this work that we're doing here is so critically important to making sure that we have students that can go effectively through the K-12 system, post-secondary, in many different pathways, so that they can come out with a meaningful career for self-sufficiency. Because many of those heads of households of 40% did not do that for a variety of reasons, which is why they are in these situations in many regards. There's a lot, that's simplifying it, there's a lot of barriers that they had to face and maybe overcome. But if we can make sure that we are keeping more kids in school and providing them pathways, multiple pathways to be able to come out and get effective jobs, then we're going to be able to tackle the 40% right out of the gate. And what you just said is absolutely true. So while Michigan Works primarily is focused on the adult population that is out there, the Alice household, from a policy standpoint, are out of our hands. Because once we get them through programs and they are hanging by a thread. And if one thing goes wrong, then they're back in the system and back where they are. So we are working right now with TED to try to develop some resource networks and with employers at the table to get at that population, to get them stronger. At the same time, so it isn't just one solution, it's multiple solutions. While we try to solve this K-12 to keep more people coming in, staying in Michigan and being more effective to get that 40% down, the people that are in there right now, how do we support them and get them out? And so, and with what Michigan Works does to be able to get to help the teachers in the K-12, there are various programs. One is coming up next Wednesday in Grand Rapids. It's called MI Career Quest. And so MI Career Quest, they have, and there's several around the state, there's going to be one in the fall in southeast Michigan, where they got the DeVos Center, and they've got 4 industry sectors where employers come out, and there's 9,000 students that go through the DeVos Center on that day with their teachers. So the teachers get to see, here are the jobs that of tomorrow and today that exist. So it helps bring an energy and focus in the classroom that when you're teaching a subject that the kids can't see there's a relevancy to, they can say that that's your pathway. So where it connects is what I would say when I talked about those workforce development boards locally. That's where you get your economic development, community, and education all trying to figure out what they're going to do with the resources they have. The great news is that we have done a fantastic job in Michigan over the last 3 governors of breaking down barriers, at least with workforce, with the state administration and the local system and lawmakers to be able to move some of these forward. And so it isn't one simple answer, and the work is never done. It's always done. I hope that kind of touched a little bit on what you were looking for.
Well, and I think Garth touched on that too, that he was saying that there's been so much online connections between students and employers, and it sounds like you're doing more in local communities to engage them person to person, face to face, and to actually see how things work in the workplace firsthand. Jeremy, you would like to say something?
Yeah, I'll add something real quick. I mean, I just want to piggyback off what Luann said, and that's the heart. Your question gets to the heart of why our department exists and why we're only 3 years old, is to bring those components together of economic, community, and talent development. That's what TED's all about. We're relatively new, but figure out how we can leverage things to better service this population. We've been building great partnerships, but an example of how we can do better. We got conversations. We have MSU under our umbrella, low-income housing. So we provide housing up to 60 or 80% of the area median income. Why can't we connect the residents there that are able-bodied to the job training programs we provide over at TIA and make sure that they have the skill sets that are there? How can we identify the barriers that they have to employment connection with a business resource network? Because this is not an easy population to serve, because it's not just a lack of skills necessarily that's a barrier. Sometimes that's not even actually the barrier. It's childcare, it's transportation, it's drug use in some case. There's a multitude of challenges that this population has, because it is such a diverse population. So it's not just one silver bullet. Say, if we get them all cars, they can get to work, or if we can just get them all trained, they'll get a job. There's a lot of challenges that we got to work and kind of collaboratively work on. And I agree with Luann. I mean, we can provide outcomes and objectives, but the solution's going to have to be locally based, and we have to be flexible to address the local needs.
Other states?
Excuse me?
So following up on her last piece, she asked about best practices in other states.
Excuse me, you're going to need a microphone.
Following up on Regina's last question was, what are some best practices that have been found in other states?
Do you have any great examples, Luann? I'm trying to think of a few.
I do think we're struggling with this as a nation.
We are.
Right.
Yeah,
So what I would say is that Michigan is often pointed to as the best practice for the nation in the integration piece of it. I would say I don't have one specific that I can say this is done very well. I know down in Texas, they've taken their integration to even another level. And so what that could look like is that in our local Michigan Works offices, we do have state employees housed in there that deliver services. And so in Texas, those state employees deliver services, but they've got different agreements that their boss is the local director. So if for example, if you're, I don't know, I don't want to pick on anyone, I'm just picking from a distance standpoint from Lansing, way up in the western UP. I'm not saying that they are not doing a bad job or anything, I'm just saying distance. The further you get away, it's more difficult to do that implementation of policies, procedures. You're not so integrated into the local culture of what's happening because your boss is elsewhere. And so if I would say anything, I would say maybe that would be something that we would want to take a look at to be able to do even greater integration with the customer at the heart of it. It has nothing to do with turf or anything. I've had people sometimes say, well, you're trying to take over XYZ, and I go, oh my gosh, I don't even have enough time to do my job. I don't want to do your job, even if I wanted to, I don't have time. That's not what this is about. It is truly about collaborating and focusing on the highest, best use of time and resources to be able to do that. So we look all the time when we go nationally. If you have one that is near and dear to your heart, I know that we would love to take a look and see what are the best elements that we can integrate in Michigan. But I would say that Michigan is really a leader for the nation.
Okay. So I want to follow up on Luann's comments about integration. I thought the presentations were excellent, and I thought we were at one end of the spectrum. And what concerns me is the other end. I was just rereading this morning the third grade reading report where 2/3 of our kids aren't proficient by third grade. So I'm sitting here listening to your comments going, but there's so many of our kids who are not going to be ready for any of this. And so I think that's the struggle we have. There are a number of states that do a whole lot better than Michigan does in educating through the K-12 system. And we seem to either want to work at early childhood or where you are, and we've got this big gap in between. And so I challenge you to think about how do we integrate, or how do we work with the teachers in the school district who is teaching out of subject matter expert training, who hasn't been trained in science or math and is trying to struggle to teach science and math in an urban or rural school. You know, I challenge you to figure out how to get the local workforce boards to think about the customer and the client versus organizations. And so I think that's where Michigan misses. We are doing so much good right at this level, but we've got so many people not ready for what you're talking about. Now there's a, I'll use W.E.B. Du Bois. There's a talented 10th that's ready. But beyond that, where are the rest of them? And I think that's Michigan's biggest challenge.
So if I can clarify, when I was talking about the integration, I really was talking about at the Michigan Works level. And so that conversation of what you just said is exactly when I'm around policy tables talking about we need to support the K-12 system to make sure that they have the resources needed. And now you've given me even a clear definition of what that looks like. So when I'm talking about why, when I hear you talk about the Alice households, I'm very much focused on the fact that the children need support. The teachers need stronger, I'm probably, nobody recorded write this down, raw material? But that's true. The kids have to come in ready to rumble in the day and be able to be supported at night. And the teachers need to be supported in the education pieces.
Just to say, the early literacy is terribly important. Michigan does not do well in this area at all. There are groups of faculty at some of the universities at mine and at Michigan and at Wayne and so on who are developing ways to work with early elementary school teachers to help them learn the best practices, the things we've learned about how to teach reading at an early grade. Because it's an area in education where a lot has been learned in the last 10 or 15 years about what makes for effective literacy instruction. And not to the extreme of computer science, but still a lot of the teachers who are out there were prepared years before some of the recent work on literacy instruction, and it's important to provide the professional development for them so they can help our kids learn to read.
That takes us back to our first forum in September. Early childhood education was the topic. And all of those presentations from that forum and this forum are posted on our website. So you'll be able to go to that, refer back to it, and share that information, share those presentations with your community members and the people that you work with, and possibly parents who would be interested in this topic. So do we have time for one more question? I believe we do. We're good? One more, yes.
I guess my question is somewhat related. There have been some changes in recent years to the merit curriculum to give more flexibility and allow for more CTE courses. Do you support those changes? Are there additional changes that should be made while still maintaining the rigor of the curriculum?
Part of that, yeah. And I didn't throw policy bills up there, but as far as what we're advocating for on the Marshall Plan item, one is continuing the flexibility that was in there with the sunset on the foreign language item. We are supportive of making a change. There's a bill that does, I think it's foreign language substitution for computer science. We'd like to get computer science counted as one of the merit curriculum requirements, whether that be an upper end math class. Pedagogy is closer to math than it is a foreign language, or foreign language substitution. We're very open. As we've been working with the employers and other community folks out there, a lot of them have said you don't need to change the merit requirements as much as you do figuring out how to teach it differently and better. And when I talked about the tech center, I've got example after example of tech centers that are, and I bring them up because they found a way to integrate this education and these, whether it's in their finance or healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and marketing or graphic design courses, criminal justice, all these different types of courses you can take at a tech center now. They found a way to integrate the merit curriculum into all of those courses. So the students that are going there are getting a professional, highly qualified teacher 2 or 3 days a week teaching them the core content, while they're also getting the highly qualified teacher in regards to whatever the core content is, whether that's manufacturing or marketing. And they do just fine. Turns out if you give students the opportunity to have a meaningful understanding of Algebra 2 in a project-based learning and contextualized environment, they actually can learn it in 2 days and learn it a heck of a lot better than 5 days in 4 walls and a whiteboard. And We've got a lot of great school districts that can go back and show you the evidence and have that conversation. It's just about getting more of those examples out there and helping schools figure out how to do it. I think it's the bigger barrier.
Thank you. And switch in. Let's go to this end and give some closing comments and work our way down.
Well, I guess my closing comment is that I'm very optimistic when I see government, education, workforce, business, community partners, all of the diverse areas represented coming together to have dialogue to solve the issue. Because the way forward is a multi-pronged attack, and we have no time to waste, and every single body matters, whether it's an adult, whether it's a child, and it's all connected, and I feel very optimistic that we're on the right path.
Just say, I think it's great that the government's thinking about investing and trying to improve the education of all students. We've been talking about college and career ready for many years. Often the career ready part has not gotten the attention that it should. There's some overlap in the curriculum, but it's important, and we need to think both about what needs to be taught and how to help the teachers learn to teach it.
I think a key is partnership in education. Again, the employers have to play a part in this with the educators. One without the other creates a mix that doesn't work for either one. And so they've got to sit down together. Never will the tenured faculty listen to industry professionals on what to teach, but they can have impact on certain items, and together we can figure this out going forward.
I'll just echo Garth's comments. It's going to be that conversation, Lance and everybody's actually. We need to continue the conversation. If I had one charge, if you ask anybody in this room, ask me what to do leaving this room, engage your fellow education, business, community members, etc., to have a conversation about what can we do in this space. How can we provide more meaningful career exposure and learning opportunities for our students to get great careers? It's those conversations locally that are going to make this happen. Whatever we do on a state policy side or whatever resources we put behind it won't be successful if the people out there in the different regions and on the ground and in the field don't believe it and haven't figured it out.
Thank you. In closing, please stick with this conversation and visit the Marshall Plan. Check it out. It is unique in that it is sort of a plan that comes from lessons learned over the years. So it really comes together nicely. It gives you a lot to think about. So we need more input on that, and we need continuous conversation, as everyone here said. I think one thing that hasn't been specifically said but really rings out for me in listening to this conversation is how important it is to let the people you work with and the people you work for and the people that work for you know how valuable they are in this state and in their communities, and that they have an important role to play here. So with that, we'll bid you adieu and remind you about May 2nd's forum on foster care. They're also looking at employability and foster care children as they transition to adulthood and become working members of society. So we hope to see you there. Matt earlier had extended an invitation to the legislative staff training for staff of the legislature. So that's April 30th. And all of these things are posted on our website. So if you need a reminder, check that. Thanks for being here today.